Chad Millman from the Action Network.
Nice.
We're going to get into a lot of cool stuff right now. Obviously, with what's going on in our neck of the woods. We had Chad last year. 1 year ago, we were talking about sports gambling in Atlantic City, and now here we are 1 year later. So we're thrilled to have Chad back from the Action Network about 1 year later, how everything is just like so, it's so weird. We were at the Heat game last night, and here on your phone, you can't put a bet in on your DraftKings or your apps or whatever. But in New Jersey, it's so second nature. Like, hey, the Sixers are down 10. Can I get good value here? It's just crazy how 1 year it's so different.
Yeah, I remember the conversation yesterday. I thought it was really great, and you guys were totally into it. And I'll give you an example of what you're talking about. I live in Connecticut. I work in New York. I specifically, we've almost made it an Action Network mandate that if you are going to travel for work, you must fly out of Newark, because that way you can go make a bet. And so I got to Newark 90 minutes early on Tuesday morning, and I made 13 bets in about, I'd say, 35 minutes. I made
Only 13?
I had to do some research, too. So I made 7 prop bets, I made 3 golf bets, and I made 3 NBA bets for that night, which I won all 3. And so it was magical to just open up the app, and I plugged in exactly what I wanted, and I was done.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I was just telling Mike before you jumped on, I feel like it's already been in Atlantic City and Jersey forever. And it's still so new, right? And just the legalization has really shifted, I think, the whole landscape of our society in Jersey and South Jersey in particular. But what's the challenges ahead for the country, for every state individually, to really make this mainstream, like make this completely normal and make this a part of every sports telecast and make it just – I think it's getting there, but you know better than anyone, it has probably a long way to go.
Yeah, I think the telecasts – are going to be the last sort of barrier to fall. I think that it's really hard until every state has it and you feel like it's as sort of second nature to the conversation as fantasy. But fantasy is a good analogy here, right? Yeah. How often is fantasy discussed on Monday Night Football? How often is Al Michael? They're not. Like, it's not like when Tyreek Hill has a great game and scores an 80-yard touchdown pass that Chris Collinsworth is saying, well, that's going to be great for the fantasy owners, right? Like, no one's going to come out and say that's going to be great for bettors. I do think that there will be a time as it becomes adopted in more and more places where you start to see a few more graphics, where it becomes a bit more part of the pregame shows. But I don't see a time in the next 5 years where all of a sudden broadcasts generally are about the betting. It's just not going to happen. I will say, the one thing that will make it more commonplace is if everybody does what New Jersey did. New Jersey did it. And you can say this almost never about New Jersey, and I say this as someone who lived in New Jersey for a long time. New Jersey never does anything perfectly that feels without politics. And they did sports betting perfectly. They did all mobile, unfettered sports betting. I can take the PATH train from New York City, be in Hoboken in 5 minutes. 44% of the bets in New Jersey are made within 2 miles of the state line. So that tells you everybody's going into Jersey, right? $4.5 billion in
handle. That's amazing stat,
yeah,
by the way.
Yeah, it is.
$4.5 billion in handle in New Jersey. Nevada did 5.3 this year. Second time they've gone over 5. You think that, like, there isn't interest in betting? That's $10 billion in total handle between 2 states right now.
Well, I wanted to, when you talk about where it's going, I mean, there's a team now in Vegas.
Sure.
Do you envision one day, like when you go to a horse track, you can walk up to a window at a game and make a bet?
You're going to be able to walk up to a window. You can do this in the UK, right? So you go to a soccer match.
You can do it in the Sixers
you already can do it.
They have the kiosks upstairs in
the So you can do it. I think the next stage is really, yes, it will be commonplace for you to be able to go make a bet inside of a stadium wherever sports betting is legal. I think that sort of barrier has been broken. That taboo is gone. The next real phase is, are you able to make in-game bets? And does the latency improve inside stadiums? This will be a great weekend because the Dolphins have
Which is what the AAF wanted to try to do, right?
And like the Dolphins have made a big deal about their entire stadium is now wired for 5G. Teams want the stadiums wired for 5G so people can bet inside the stadium.
Right.
It's not because they want you to be able to watch the video of the play you just saw.
Right.
And so that's sort of the next phase. That's how it becomes commonplace.
Are you surprised, not surprised? What's your level of the success that this has been in a place like Atlantic City?
Well, I'm not surprised about the success in New Jersey because they were ready and they made it mobile, and that's the most powerful thing you can do. I can't say that I'm seeing this as being something that is the panacea for Atlantic City, right? Because it's still about betting on your phones, and it's not about being in a sports book. And I say this.
Do you think the apps are more powerful than the books, the rooms?
100%.
Okay.
Look, it's, what is it? 90% of the activity, the handle is coming through your phone, is mobile. So I think it's a great experience for people who want to be in Atlantic City. And I say this sort of gently, knowing the audience I'm talking to, but I don't see this as being like the thing that turns Atlantic City back into Boardwalk Empire. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that time has passed, and it's impressive that they've been able to turn books the way they have and turn it into an experience. You know, years and years ago, and you guys probably know Ray Lesniak, right? So years ago, I did a story for E60 about Delaware legalizing sports betting. And it was right when Ray had first filed the lawsuit to have the federal betting ban overturned. This is 2008, 2009. And we were walking through the Borgata. And Ray said to me, can you imagine a Super Bowl weekend? The Giants are in the Super Bowl, and this place, as a sports book, is filled with bettors. He could not envision at the time that this was going to be something that was predominantly mobile. But I do hope that Atlantic City, like this weekend, I hope it's packed. I hope the sports books are flooded. I hope people get to have that sort of singular experience.
You know, Chad Millman's with us from the Action Network, and it's such a cool conversation about what's happening in our market. And, you know, the fact that the books, you talk about the experience. I mean, Ocean put one up, and then, William Hill's got theirs, and everyone's just trying to outdo them. I mean, I've never been to Vegas, oddly enough, so I don't know what. Never been. So I don't know what the comparisons are.
Crazy.
But would you say that Atlantic City did it right with their books? When you looked at what they like, is it comparable? Is it totally different?
No, it feels like they're doing a great job.
Yeah. Because to me, I'm like, oh my God, these places are unbelievable. But of course, I have nothing to compare it to.
I've heard a few people say certain books in Atlantic City were better than some of the books in Vegas.
Because what Atlantic City could do was build from scratch based on what's relevant today.
Right.
Whereas so many sports books in Vegas are built from years and years ago, and they feel tired.
Yeah.
You know? And so, like, the book in Vegas that is amazing, you go to, like, the Westgate, and they have rebuilt their book to feel like a stadium. Mm-hmm. And it's phenomenal. But here's what's really interesting. Nevada announced that it had $5.3 billion in handle in 2019. And I remember a sportsbook operator, a book manager, said to me years ago, when we were talking about it becoming legal, it was like, I'm like, do you worry if it becomes legal, it takes away business from Vegas? And he goes, no. It's like riding your local roller coaster. Once you've tried it, you're going to want to go to Disney World. And I think people still look at Vegas as being the Disney World, and that experience is going to matter.
Chad, real quick, I guess, as we've been talking about what's going on this game, what are some interesting numbers that are just kind of rattling around your head as Sunday approaches?
So what's most interesting to me are the player props. Like, you look at the game as a side bet, whether you're betting on Kansas City -1, San Francisco +1, +1.5, whatever the number is right now. There's no edge. There's no statistical edge. I can't look at any metrics. No wise guy can look at metrics and say, oh, yeah, you got to bet on the Chiefs or you got to bet on the Niners. It's really about the props at this point. There's 400 props. There's derivatives on every single player 4 times over, right? And so that's where you're going to find your edges. And what makes that interesting about the casual bettor is some of them are more comfortable betting on players. Like, the idea of betting on a team is challenging, but you bet on a player, and all of a sudden you understand performance. Maybe you play fantasy. Do you think Patrick Mahomes is going to have more than 3 touchdowns? Is Jimmy Garoppolo going to have more than 240 yards? So to me, it's the player props that are the most interesting opportunity.
This does seem like a tough game to bet the line.
It's almost impossible.
So the player props really are
it's
like
the
you're
way
saying.
to go.
Yeah.
Like I am on, and I the bets I made when I was in Newark, and I was just looking at my FanDuel app because I was telling a buddy of mine that I had Patrick Mahomes under 30.5 rushing yards. I had Emmanuel Sanders over 3.5 receptions. I got Damian Williams over 12.5 rushing attempts, over 3.5 receptions.
Why am I not writing this down?
Seriously. So,
we have it on tape.
Yeah, true.
Download the Action Network app. I'll put them all in there. You can follow me.
We have this recorded. We can listen to this interview.
So, to me, that's what I'm thinking about.
Chad Millman from the Action Network. Excellent stuff. Great conversation on what's happened, because I remember a year ago we were like, how's this going to go? It's going, man, because we're at a game the other night and we're like, the heater down. I think I can get good value. No, you can't do it. In fact, real quick, you can do it in Philly now, but you couldn't in the beginning. As soon as you hit that bridge, you had to make sure you got it in before you went over to go to the Sixer game. You'd be sitting couldn't do it, and the Jersey side was 5 minutes away. But
so frustrating.
That's all different now. Chad, thanks so much, man.
It's
good to
see
you.
Thank you very much.
Of course, Atlantic City. And by the way, speaking of gambling, big game experience in Atlantic City. It's at Wild Wild West. Bally's. Catch all the action at the largest screens on the East Coast, Atlantic City's largest sports book. Enjoy live music, tailgate bites, self-serve beer, and more. It's all going down at Atlantic City's Wild Wild West Casino. They help bring Radio Row to you guys back in Atlantic City. That was Chad Millman.